Well, a very good day to you, and thank you for joining us for this very, very special webinar all about Japan and travelling with Botanica World Discoveries. My name is Bas Bosschieter from Botanica, and I'm here in our Melbourne office, but I'm delighted to be joined by one of our most experienced botanical tour guides, Simon Rickard, who has an absolute passion for Japan. Morning, Simon. How are you?
Good morning, Bas. I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Now, as one of Botanica's longest serving guides, and we spoke before that Botanica's been going to Japan for 20 years. So it's probably fair to say that you've been going to Japan for the last 20 years, because I know you guide almost every one of our Japan tours. You've said before that Japanese garden is all about restraint and reverence. For someone who has never experienced a Japanese garden before, how is it different to those that they would experience in Europe and Australia?
Well, Japanese gardens are all about design, really, and they have an amazing precision and economy of design. So every single element in a Japanese garden is placed with precision, selected with precision. There's not an extraneous element, there's nothing unnecessary to the design. And I think it's this restraint that really makes them so very different from Western gardens. In Japan, they say that a garden is not finished until you can leave nothing else out. Whereas, British gardens are very exuberant. They're full of different kinds of plants, colour, rare plants, fragrance. In Japanese gardens, the most important elements of the garden are actually stones, and plants are only used as far as they can contribute to the visual design. So plants are almost a garnish in a Japanese garden, which is very different to the British concept.
Okay. Fantastic photos are coming up, and it's worth mentioning that most of these photos you've taken yourself, Simon, and we've added some from the team in as well. That provides that authenticity about what people are actually going to see. Now, each year, Botanica visits Japan in both autumn and spring. Our next journey, of course, in November this year, taking in the Japanese autumn. I often hear people debate, should I be traveling in autumn or spring? But we also often hear the term wabi-sabi, and that I think relates more to the autumn side of Japan and the beauty of imperfection, as they say. Why is autumn in particular such a wonderful time to experience Japan?
You mentioned this term wabi-sabi, which is actually quite difficult to translate into English. It means simplicity, restraint, nostalgia, poignancy, the beauty of imperfection. And autumn is the season which really typifies wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi actually is a precept which colours all of the Japanese art forms. This simplicity, restraint, rusticity, sufficiency, beauty of imperfection. And autumn sums up that feeling so well because, the exuberance of summer is over. The stillness and silence of winter hasn't come yet. So still there's some life and colour in the landscape. Not many plants are in flower at that time, and the ones that are, such as the chrysanthemum, seem all the more poignant and precious because you know that soon they'll be cut down by the winter frost. So this season of autumn really embodies the wabi-sabi precept, which we see colouring all of the Japanese arts. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's a bit of an airy-fairy concept.
Well, it is, but it's really about the life cycle. And when we are talking about potentially travelling to Japan in that autumn time, could you tell us maybe 2 or 3 gardens that we do visit that really capture your imagination and probably highlights for you?
Well, actually, nature's garden, just the natural side of Japan in autumn is at its most spectacular because a lot of the hillsides in Japan are covered with autumn colouring trees, particularly Japanese maples. And of course,
Hmm.
our listeners, our viewers will know that Japanese maples have the most spectacular autumn colour of any deciduous tree. So we see these hillsides that are just tapestries of gold and orange and stoplight red. Just the natural countryside itself is really the most spectacular, I would say, at that time of year.
And Zen rock gardens, I know they're talked about often. Is there a particular area that we visit on this tour that really encapsulates the very best of the Zen rock garden?
Yes, actually there is. The rock gardens, what are called kare sansui, dry water landscape in Japanese. These gardens are associated with Zen Buddhist temples. Zen is a very ascetic
Mhm.
strand of Buddhism, and they're particularly concentrated in Kyoto, which is the ancient capital of Japan and still very much its cultural capital today. So that's probably the place where we see most of these stone gardens in Kyoto. And for Australians, it can be a little bit. They can seem a little bit impenetrable, a bit difficult to understand. So
Mhm.
it really does help to go with someone who can explain what you're looking at, explain the motivations behind them, and gardening all around the world. Gardening is a form of visual communication. So
Mhm.
just like a poet or a writer would use words to tell a story, to elicit an emotional response from the reader, gardeners use plants, or in the case of the Japanese stones, to tell
Mm.
a story and to elicit an emotional response from the viewer. And so I can help our guests to read what they're looking at, to understand what the story is that the rocks are trying to tell them. And actually having guests have a light bulb moment where they suddenly start to get why, Ryoanji, the very famous stone garden in
Mm.
Kyoto, is UNESCO World Cultural Heritage, and the pile of rocks at the car park at the end of their street is not. It's really exciting watching the light bulb come on.
And I think that's the benefit of traveling with Botanica, Simon. Wouldn't you agree that
Mm.
not
Oh,
only,
yes.
are our guests led by someone as wonderful as you, who really knows, so much about Japan, but we do also bring in a number of local experts to really get all the information that we
Mm.
can on every destination that we travel to. An absolute bonus.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about traveling with Botanica is that, if you just want to go and have a look at the pretty flowers, that's fine. But if you want to
Mm.
get added layers of understanding, if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the motivation behind a garden, the design elements, learn stories about the plants, then it pays to travel with a botanical guide like me.
Fantastic. Simon, our autumn trip in November this year is predominantly travelling on the train services in Japan. I'm sure you'll agree, one of the most outstanding forms of transport anywhere in the world. Could you just explain how easy it actually is?
Ah, yes, we will be travelling between cities in our autumn tour only by bullet train. And bullet
Mm.
train's really fun. It's more like air travel. These bullet trains even look like planes without wings, and they travel at 300 and something kilometres an hour. They're very, very comfortable and very smooth. As the botanical guide, my greatest anxiety is just getting everybody on the train before it leaves,
Of
because,
course.
of course, being Japan, they're so efficient. They only roll up for
Mm.
30 seconds and then they disappear again. But once you're on, it's just it's so luxurious. And we go through a variety of different landscapes. For example, on the day when we travel from Tokyo to Kanazawa, we go underneath the Japanese Alps, and we go from the plains of the
Fantastic.
eastern side of Honshu underneath the Alps, and then we pop out with mountains covered in snow and autumn-coloured trees all around us.
Fabulous.
So we get to see a lot of variation in the landscape, and occasionally we even get to see Mount Fuji if it's come out for the day.
Fantastic. It really does make it so exciting traveling on those very, very efficient trains. But of
Yeah, I love
course,
it.
with this wonderful image we've got on the screen now, It's not only about the botanical theme and it's not only about the transport, it's also about the wonderful cultural immersion, really getting into the lifestyle of the Japanese and the history of the Japanese. Um, it really does work well, combining both botanical and that wonderful cultural experience. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm. Yeah, Japan's got this amazing sort of unity of concept across all of its art forms. Whether it's architecture, we can see here the old Higashi Tea District in Kanazawa. Whether it's ceramics or painting or gardening, there's a sort of unity of concept across all of the arts. The interesting thing about Japan is that most of the art forms in Japan were imported from China from about the 8th century onwards. So things like the practice of drinking tea, the mode of dress, the writing system, certain elements of garden design, bonsai, these were all borrowed from Japan. But then in the late 12th century, something cataclysmic happened, which was that the samurai warrior class of society, who had been the vassals of the imperial family, rose up and seized power from the imperial family. And then they ran Japan as a military dictatorship for the next 700 years. And of course, being a warrior people, they were very ascetic. And they preferred a strand of Buddhism called Zen, which was also very ascetic, not aesthetic, but ascetic, very spare. And all of those art forms that had been imported from China for the previous 400 years then began to evolve in their own different direction. And this is what's led to Japan having such a unique culture today. And you can see the same cultural precepts in every art form, whether it's, as I say, ceramics or the mode of dress or gardens or whatever it is. So, that is, for me, the most exciting thing about visiting Japan is just how strong their traditional culture is, as well as their modern culture in things like the bullet trains.
Exactly. No,
That
fantastic.
photograph that's up on screen there, by the way, that the photograph that's up right now are Shinto priests and shrine just entering a Shinto temple, and I just snapped this photograph as they were entering the temple precinct. And this is something very, very ancient that we see, and it's just something you can't see anywhere but in Japan.
Fantastic. Great photo too. We've set the scene that we've spoken about our autumn tour. Now we've spoken about the gardens that we're likely to see, the wonderful colours, the traditions, the history, the culture, the modern history. This all then we move to the springtime. Of course, springtime, we get to see a number of the similar things that we would see in the autumn time, but of course, spring, cherry blossom, or sakura. Everyone talks about it. As I said before, people tend to debate whether they should go at springtime or autumn time. From what I've seen and from speaking to you, I think I should go both periods personally. But Simon, can you tell us what people are likely to see on our spring voyage, which is April next year, of course, slightly different to the autumn journey, whereby we predominantly use a ship. So we're traveling on a beautiful vessel, Island Sky. Unpack once, you're seeing the great scenery. It's your floating hotel that we're traveling on. But from a garden perspective, how different is it to that autumn itinerary?
Yes, spring is very different to the autumn. The cherry blossom is really abundant. And the particular cherry that the Japanese love, which is the one you're seeing on the screen right now, is called a Yoshino cherry. And each individual flower is very small and very, very pale colour. So they're not what we think of as a flowering cherry in Australia or the UK or New Zealand. But this is the one the Japanese particularly love because the flowers are so ethereal and the flowers come out on the twigs before the leaves emerge. And it gives this look of purity to the trees. So when you see these clouds of just the very, very palest pink flowers on bare twigs, and it's worth pointing out that it's not so much spring cherry blossom time, it's the end of winter. It's actually,
Yes.
it corresponds to the snowdrop time in the United Kingdom. So the weather can still be quite cold at that time of year. But when you do see the cherry blossom out in flower, it's something quite magnificent. And it's a time of year, it's the one time of year, in fact, when the Japanese are at their most relaxed and most demonstrative. You know, the Japanese people are very reserved normally, very formal. They don't really show their feelings in public except at cherry blossom time. And at that time of year, we'll see hundreds of people picnicking underneath the cherry blossom trees and drinking in public and just having a great time. So it is a very festive time of year, although it can be a little bit chilly still.
They often say it's a celebration, but I wonder, from a crowd perspective, is it as busy as people make it out to be? Because as I said, everyone talks about going to Japan at cherry blossom time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry to tell you, Bus, that yes, it is very, very busy in the springtime, because of
Yeah.
course we are not the only people in the world who want to go and see the cherry blossom in Japan. But you know, we travel around on our beautiful Island Sky ship. We have our floating hotel, which is our private space, and then every day we hop off the ship, we go and have an excursion, and then we leave the madding crowds behind and come back to our lovely ship and sail off to the next destination. So although it is very busy at cherry blossom time, we still have plenty of time to ourselves on our ship.
And I think that, and looking at the itinerary, I absolutely love the itinerary, and I'm a huge fan of the Island Sky. It's a homely ship, as I like to call it. The suites are nice, they're generous in size. But what I particularly love, and the fact that we're chartering this vessel, is that once we are back on the ship, like you say, away from the crowds, that gives you and any other of the traveling guides the opportunity to talk to guests on an individual basis, or even do a couple of presentations on what people have just seen or what they're likely to see. And I think that's hugely important.
Yes, that's right. We run lectures rather on the ship. So each of the botanical guides will deliver a lecture or two about something that interests them. Excuse me. So I will be talking about giving an overview of the history and the design elements of Japanese gardens, and I also give a lecture about how to appreciate bonsai. And then we also have little recaps, which is just a tiny little mini lecture, 5-minute long lecture during the evening's briefing, where we might, the botanical guides might talk about something that has caught our eye during the day, or something that we've been asked about by our guests.
Now, as part of the springtime journey, and of course, we're on our wonderful Island Sky, we're traveling around, I've heard the mention of the Adachi Museum. It's famous for its incredibly manicured, award-winning gardens. Tell us why it is award-winning, Simon, and I know we've got a couple of shots of it here as well.
Yes. The Adachi Museum is really out of the way. It's in the middle of nowhere. But we make a pilgrimage to go there because the garden is just so astounding. It's I can only describe it as hyper real. It's like it looks like AI. It looks slightly fake,
Right.
but it's not fake. It's real. The design is so strong. The maintenance is so strong. There's not a twig on the ground, not a pine needle out of place. And you view the garden mostly from inside the building, which is itself an art gallery with a beautiful collection of it's got lacquerware, it's got illustrations from children's books, ceramics. It's quite an eclectic sort of collection. But then you look out at this scenery of the garden with the borrowed landscape beyond, and it's really electric. Actually, Bus, I'll let you in on a secret. Last autumn, when I visited Japan, our colleague Keith Queck came with us. And
Mm.
when he got to the Adachi Museum, he was so overawed by this place. He shed a little tear, and I had to put my arm around him and
Oh,
give him a little hug. It really is such
lovely.
a moving garden because it's so perfect. This is another picture of the Adachi Museum, which I took.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So much to look forward to on both these journeys. Now, Simon, I know you love both seasons and you travel with us whenever you can, irrespective of the season. If someone watching today is trying to decide between should I go for the autumn colours in November 2026 or the delicate cherry blossoms of springtime in 27, I would simply say go on both. But how would you suggest that they make their choice on this occasion?
Sure. We have actually had quite a few guests who have done both trips with me.
Mm.
But I would suggest, the gardens are beautiful at any time of year in Japan. What I would say is think about your own level of ability and how strenuous you want them to be. If you
Mhm.
don't mind being a little bit adventurous and having to pack an overnight bag and get on a bullet train and say goodbye to your big suitcase for a couple of nights while we go to Kanazawa or Okayama, then come on the autumn tour. If you're feeling a little bit adventurous, come on the autumn tour. But if you just want to unpack once and be pampered to death, come on the spring tour on board the Island Sky. That's my advice.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Simon, we've just quickly got both itineraries here to show, and you can see this first itinerary in the autumn time, the wonderful train system of Japan taking us from one destination to the next. 12 days, escorted by yourself, Simon. I think we're limiting this one to 24 or 26 guests. Simply, we don't want to make it too crowded. And of course, you're trying to get everyone on that train in time. Actually, 15 to 25 guests. So it is small group travel. 11 nights
Yeah.
accommodation in good 4 to 5 star hotels. Meals, everything is taken care of for you. But most importantly, you get to travel with someone of Simon's ability and quality to really bring to home what you are looking at every destination. Alternatively, we've got our wonderful springtime journey. As you can see here, we use a vessel as our floating home. It's 10 nights on the lovely Island Sky, the wonderful, wonderful expedition vessel. It normally takes 130 odd guests, so there's plenty of room, a couple of great dining options. You can sit out if the weather's lovely out in the back deck and have meals out there, or alternatively in the dining room. But as I said, what a wonderful vessel to come back to after a day of touring, take in a lecture or really get to know the experts that we have on board, because Simon, we are taking up to 100 guests on this itinerary, so we will have 3 or 4 botanical guides. And I love the way that you mentioned that you'll speak about your areas of expertise or your passions, and I'm sure the others will as well. So it just really captures the whole scene and why we're traveling. We do visit South Korea. We have to go outside of Japanese waters on any cruise that we do in Japan. So we touch on South Korea. But what we've also done on this journey is given you an opportunity, and China is becoming incredibly popular with a number of travelers now. So we've created a China extension. So you can extend, stay a bit longer, see the wonderful areas of Beijing. So see some of the momentous scenery there, including the Great Wall, Forbidden City, Tiananmen Square, and then bullet train, just like Japan, fast train down to Xi'an to see those wonderful terracotta warriors, even including a Yangtze River 4-night cruise. So be it as it may, you can see Japan wonderfully during the springtime. You'll touch on South Korea as well. But if you want to take in a little bit more, please join us in China. Some great things to see and do there. And of course, Simon, people are just going to be spellbound by the wonderful gardens they see, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I look forward to having everyone come and visit Japan with me.
Excellent. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful to hear your thoughts. Thank you for sharing those wonderful images as well that we were able to put up on the slideshow. And I really think it brings to the front of mind, if you are interested in Japan, here's two great opportunities: autumn time in November this year or springtime next year. Simon will be on both. You're in very good hands. Simon, enjoy the rest of today. Thank you so much for your time. And to all of you out there, don't hesitate to call our wonderful team. If you are interested, we'll certainly get your booking locked away immediately. Thank you for your time today, Simon, and thank you for joining us on this webinar.
Thanks, Bas.